I recently read an article by Sashi Tharoor's son, Inshan. It was in the aftermath of the Nairobi terror attack in 2013 that killed 68 and injured 150 people. He wrote about the link of wildlife trafficking and terror, and that the wildlife industry was a $20 billion industry. We'll have Dr. Neeraj joining us tomorrow, Head of Traffic India, who will be able to add more to that. But anyways, if you're looking at the wildlife trafficking industry, one thing that can be said about that is that there is a method to their madness. You know, they're effective, highly networked, collaborative, and innovative. I sometimes wonder whether the conservation industry is like that. If I were to ask all of you, if the above adjectives, efficient, highly networked, collaborative, and innovative, could be used to describe the conservation industry, how many of you would agree? Can I have a show of hands, please? I couldn't believe that. There were just like 2. Can we repeat that once again, please? There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So it's you know. So the writing is on the wall. If you were to use the adjectives, efficient, highly networked, collaborative, and innovative, could we use those adjectives with similar intensity to describe the conservation industry? Would you say yes? The industry of conservation, sir. The conservation industry. Not a chance, yeah. Yeah, so the writing is on the wall, but at least we have a moral high ground, you know. That is what pays for conferences like this. Is it a profitable industry? I mean, let's say we have spent $150,000 into these conferences that are going to be taking place over the next 4 days. How many elephants are we going to save? What is the return on that investment? If you have looked at the signages of the event, you'll see that we have quite a few, sponsors that are from the corporates. Before they could ask us this question, we quietened them with lots of rhetoric, nostalgic rhetorics. We have been doing it for 4 years now. Because how else could you answer a question like that? So one of the things that I look at when I see the conservation industry is that our products and services are not valued enough. If you can't value your product and services well enough, there is no way you're going to be able to package it well enough. If you're not going to be able to package your services and products well enough, there's no way you're going to have enough buy-in. You're not going to have the critical mass required in customer buy-in to turn this into a thriving and profitable industry. So I'll move on to the next point because I promised Aparna that I'll be really quick. The next point I would like to just bring up is who actually is a conservationist. Are we all conservationists? Is it only the people that work for government organizations, for conservation organizations? And if yes, what makes them different from the ones that don't? I think I went too fast there. Yeah. I think this is a line that every conservationist has used at some point of time or another. But what is this relationship that we are talking about? We'll just have a look at a relationship between a conservationist and a poacher. How does that relationship differ in relation to nature? The same can be said about poachers too. The same argument can be used for poachers too. The only difference being that poachers extract directly, we extract indirectly. Look at the amount of printouts we have done for this conference. Look at the amount of power we are using. We aren't all too different, in fact. We are pretty similar. It's just a matter of opportunities and choices that we've been presented. That's what makes us, slightly different. I would like to raise the last point. Who are conservation decision makers? Who are the decision makers? Who are the most important single group of people that are going to decide whether the forest and the diversity are going to be preserved in the future? Is it the government? Is it the conservation organizations that are gathered here today? I don't think so. I think it's a different group of people altogether. It's the group of people we go to with options of alternate livelihoods. You know? Because we think that they don't have the capacity, not the choice, the capacity to think and choose on their own. So those are the type of people that the future of biodiversity conservation depends on. No matter whatever laws the government can pass, they can pass any types of laws, no matter whatever resolutions comes out of conferences like this. It is those people that are going to decide whether the diversity in the future is going to be maintained or not. So I think, if we actually want to look at conserving in a holistic manner, we actually have to create opportunities for people to make the choices that all of us have made to become conservationists. We need a lot of people to choose to become conservationists voluntarily, without motivational rhetoric. But can that be achieved without social mobility? So I don't have the answer to that. But we have got a session coming up now on human aspirations and conservation imperatives. That's going to be moderated by Mr. Bittu Sehgal. And I'm hoping that you'll come up with some of the answers to the questions that I've raised. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much.
I'll mention the names of the people who are here, but give an idea on your own words what you do so that they know what perspective you're coming from. I will just put a few opening remarks in before that. Is that all right? Is that generally okay? Should we do it this way to save time so we'll have more time for interactions? So the subject is the oxymoron, conservation imperatives versus human aspirations. Frankly, I don't see this as an oxymoron. I can't see how human beings, for instance, can survive without nature. So if anything, I would actually label this that are human beings a virus on this planet? Are we a plague? Are we a scourge? Are we a disease? What is it that has made us who we are, causing the impacts that we have? And as we speak, I do agree. Robin, where are you? Robin, you've left already after throwing that little grenade. The fact is we are a part of the problem and we are not a part of the solution. We are damn good at articulating the problem, but we are not a part of the solution. Our lifestyles, irrespective of who we are, and it's not because you're rich or poor, if you take somebody sitting down in Mizoram using jhum cultivation, believe me, his lifestyle is equally unsupportable now. It's not possible to use jhum cultivation, which was a wonderful way to do agriculture at one point. So, at the end of the day, is it overpopulation? Is it overconsumption? One American child, I'm an American child, I consume almost as much as somebody living on Fifth Avenue, say. I took a plane to come here. Here are some home truths. First of all, everything that we are discussing in this room, we know the word climate change, but if you heard about the American presidency and all the debates that took place, it was what, 5 minutes out of 5.5 hours?
What?
Where climate change was even mentioned.
Yeah. Right.
5 minutes out of 5.5 hours. So the point is that that side of the table, which is the economic side, doesn't even accept that climate change is a problem, even if they're mouthing it. Whether it's President Obama or whether it's my Prime Minister or anybody else, they somehow seem to feel that we'll squeak through. I've got news for all of us. We're not squeaking through. We're seeing a lot of damage taking place. One of the things, Madhusudan, you know this, you're an ecologist, okay? Nature's not going to give us any judgments. No judgments at all. Not going to say, good boy, you're a field biologist, therefore maybe you're an okay guy. It's just going to give consequences. And here is the oxymoron part of this is our attitude to nature. We believe we have become the gods that we've invented. We've changed temperature and humidity. I used to tell, Bruce, I used to tell kids, human beings don't have the technology to destroy life on Earth. I said, we'll go, but life will still continue. Now, I've had to revisit that question because what's the difference between us or Venus on Mars or the moon? It's just that little film of atmosphere on top. If you change that atmosphere, we're just another rock in space, then forget about it. The tube worms in the Marianas Trench are gone just at some point, maybe a little later, but they'll go if the atmosphere decides to dissipate and vanish. Climate change is not a disease, it's a symptom of a disease, and we possibly are the disease. That's the position of humility from which I think anybody, whether you're an economist or whether you're a field biologist, we should approach it from that point of view, and maybe we'll get to some solutions. Bruce had spoken to us about the World Bank. Here's what's been happening in India in the last 30 years or 40 years with the World Bank. Forget about all the other sectors. Forestry sector. I was sitting over there with my jaw. I had to pick it off the carpet every once in a while because they said the forests are basically inefficient. The productivity of a natural forest is just not good enough. You have to increase the productivity. So they went around giving huge loans to cut down perfectly good ecosystems which were biodiverse and planted them with tropical pine, with eucalyptus and all these various things and wattle and stuff like this. Because why? We could get wood. Because what was the other use of anything else? That is, the oxymoron part of it is only on our side of things. It's not on the nature side of things. Nature is everything that Robin was talking about, efficient. There's nothing in nature. You might talk about anything, the iridescence of a peacock's tail. It's nothing to do with beauty, it's to do with health. If it's not healthy, that female is going to...
Can we talk?
Yeah, that female is...
Otherwise, please,
See, I'm wearing two caps.
look at all these people.
I know, I'm wearing two caps. That's what I said. Opening remarks, and after that, I promise to shut up. But the issue is just this, that if we continue to believe that we as field biologists, as lawyers, as writers, as editors, that we can actually fight our way out of the bag in which we found ourselves, we're wrong. We're not going to be able to do that. So if you start from a position of humility and basically allow nature to be and find ways in which this ship, which is a self-repairing ship, comes back to some degree of self-repair, maybe we have a chance. Bruce, would you like to start? I was going to ask Professor Shu if you would like to. It's just in the order of things.
And I think it's a late day, and it's really what's called, like to record my first trip to the what's called the Assam, and more than 1.5 years ago, I was invited by Rajat to come to talk to tea farmers in Assam. The guy I met is 19 years old. He traveled from Assam across Myanmar to reach my province, Yunnan province, and then go to Sichuan, pass all China, reach the Mongolia. That's distance when he was young to travel that time. And, as tea farmer. And so that's, I think, come to last speaker about the social mobility. And that's the landscape he work, So now, so look at the landscape now, and then, I still like to say, and when one of my friends, and also James Scott, and he's a very old, very senior social scientist, he calls this region called Zumia, basically self-governing, the interlink between the nature and the culture and the local community is a part of free travel, and they manage their own landscape. So that's the landscape we're talking about. And then, of course, after the colonial, and then we try to have our own territory and their own boundary. Although the India, China was still not finalize the boundary. So that's And then now we create a protected area, try to fix the animal within boundary. And of course, you can see it doesn't work. The Chinese government even went further. We try to privatize our rangeland. We have fenced the rangeland. So you can see how difficult for animal to cross the boundary. And then similarly, we do migration boats. And then we put the nets there, the migration boats, they catch all by net. So you can see the current, the landscape, so how difficult for animal to travel around. So I try to say our landscape now is socially constructed by our mentality to fix. So people, wildlife, for traveling, that's one I like to say. and also compared economically before, and this region and used to be very productive, like Yunnan, and the way and produce a lot of tea, mushroom, the way, you know, the different trade among very active in the region. If we look at the how to say 2 centuries ago, this region, the economic what's called the gap between this region and the inland China or inland India, still much better. The economic gap are more or less, you know, same. Maybe also, how to say, the Asian elephant can be another species later on, you know, we can say both human and the nature can live in together. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor.
Well, I'll try and keep this short. And cut me off, and after 3 minutes, cut me off brutally. I'm not, stop me from talking. Well, a couple of important points. I mean, oxymoron, I think it's better to describe this, the way of framing this situation. It's a false dichotomy, I think, because the notion that, well, you often hear it from politicians and vested interests, well, we need development to help poor people, so you conservationists, you just care about animals or something like that. It's often a false dichotomy because number one. Number two, if you look at some of these bigger issues, climate change or the impact of big development projects like hydroelectric dams and so on habitat destruction. Well, those are real issues, but what you see is that already oftentimes our ideas about things, and particularly politicians' ideas about things, are technologically and in many other ways, at least 5 or even 10 years behind the times. Issue of big dams as it's got to help poor people build big dams. Well, most of the electricity goes to cities and to industries, not for energy access. Number two, a lot of the arguments over energy development. There have been recent studies, one by 4 Oxford professors in energy policy, received a lot of publicity, economists and people with the Said School of Business, where they looked at the 253 big dams over the past 30 years, and they conclude 90% of them, just in terms of conventional cost-benefit analysis, forget about resettlement, social costs, forget about environmental costs, had negative economic rates of return. The project proponents always grotesquely exaggerate the benefits and grossly underestimate, lowball the costs. And then naturally, in terms of political corruption and other kinds of corruption, a huge, gigantic infrastructure project offers lots of opportunities for it. Now, if you look at the energy development, we're also in the situation where solar photovoltaic and wind, the costs have fallen much more rapidly than the most wild optimists would have predicted 5 years ago. And the International Energy Agency estimates that if you want to really give access to energy for the 1.3 billion people in the world who don't have access, which is mainly in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, that the cheapest way by far is off-grid, microgrid, solar photovoltaic, and wind and so on. So a lot of the destruction is taking place not through aspirations of the poor or something like that, or we're all guilty. No, you often have a perverse political economy in every country. Some countries is worse. So kind of a mafia capitalism, extractive industries, this sort of thing. If you see in India what's happening, you see Southeast Asia, that you have a kind of mafia oligarchic capitalism that's really behind a lot of the resource extraction. So that's the outline. That there are solutions, but there are structures of power and political economy that have to be exposed and pressured a bit more to recognize the solutions that are already there.
Sonam?
Thank you. I'm from Bhutan, by the way, and I work for the government agency, Chief of Wildlife. So, what I actually present to the floor here is slightly a different approach that I would like to present, but basically it's up to you to whether you want to agree to that or disagree. I think when we actually talk of conservation world, this is something very complex. And we live in a world, where we are surrounded by, and I think we heard this many times from the early speaker this morning, afternoon, early afternoon. And on the other hand, we have the natural environment, which is actually housing this a rich pool of diversity, which can right from the upper taxa right down to the lower. And that decision is made by people like ourselves. People like ourselves in the government, people who are working in the NGOs, who are working in various different sectors. And when you actually talk of that, I think ultimately what we actually come down to is, how much of that everything, when you actually put it in our context to what we actually do. Do we have a limit? Do we have a standard? And how do you want to do? Even if you go back to the early panel, I think some of the panel members were saying, we have no clear goal, we have no clear objective of what we want to do. But who sets this?
Yeah,
that's the question I want to ask.
Very
Because we have a policy. One of the panel members said, Government of India has a very strong environmental policy, and we have to strictly enforce that. But telling just people, to the people, do you think they will listen? For them, it's very important to understand why we are doing that. Bhutan, we know that it's a very small country. But what we do is stand. We don't have military power, we don't have economic power. But what we have to show to the rest of the world is the green economy.
All right, okay, then carry on. I was just wondering whether I had asked a field biologist to tell you whether you agree or not, whether he agrees or not, or whether nature will take care of things. But you're really showing the way, honestly. Bhutan is showing us
So
how
in
it's
Bhutan,
possible.
like what we actually do is, Bhutan is a very poor country, there's no doubt about it. And we need to have development. But how do we do this? We have a developmental philosophy of the gross national happiness, and environmental conservation is one of the pillars. And for any development project to pass through, it has to go through a screening process. And we make sure that we balance all these pillars. The 4 pillars, the environmental, the social, the culture, and the religion, which is very important to the community.
My name is Yash. I work with WWF. I will not say all that I have to say, but I just wanted to respond. It's amazing how even with hydropower, Bhutan holds Indian companies to a standard which the Indian companies don't want to follow and can't follow in India, or rather don't want to follow. And that's amazing because, as you said, it's the technology, it's the Indian companies who are coming there and largely developing your hydropower plants. And unfortunately, we are not able to hold them to the same standards in our own country as you are able to do in your country.
I was going to ask Madhusudan from NCF whether what we're talking about, will nature sort of take care of us? Is that how nature works? Will it send us viruses? Will it hurt our immune system? How will nature look after this? How would it do the housekeeping on the planet?
I think, if nature, we've seen it time and time again, not necessarily in acts of retribution or response, but in small shrugs that nature is able to, when nature does shrug off things, there's a big price that we as humanity have to pay. But the way I would actually like to look at something like this is, a couple of days ago, Orup and I were in Delhi. We were taking a walk in the evening. And at that point, I actually could understand why a lot of conservationists, a common complaint of many conservationists, if you're in Delhi, you really can't see what's going on in this country, is something people have been saying. But I could see. I could barely see Orup, who was 30, 40 meters from me. So if people in Delhi are unable to see into the far corners of the country, I think there is a problem. So jokes apart, the point is that the air, you could cut soup cubes out of that air. The media very helpfully explained to us that the level of particulates in Delhi was 4 times the level at which Beijing imposed an emergency. And they also explained that if you spend 10 hours in the air of Delhi, it was like smoking 42 cigarettes. And what did I see? What did we see? The response of the 16 million inhabitants of Delhi who are breathing that poisoned air was to queue up and buy gas masks. So not one person thought it relevant to even step out, and there was no outcry. There was this complete acceptance of normalcy. So the point, and then, okay, I came back. In the terminal building, there was smoke and my eyes were watering. I can show you pictures if you're really interested in seeing. I came back to Mysore It's been the focus of yet another. If the air in Delhi was fouled up, I came back to Mysore where I live, and that's been the epicenter of a large conflict over riparian rights that's been happening between the upper riparian state, my state of Karnataka, and the lower riparian state of Tamil Nadu over sharing of river waters. It's the end of the monsoon. We should have had no problem. We should have had rains for 6 months. Our reservoirs should have been full. The crop should have been flourishing, and we should have had water to share. But that wasn't the case. At the end of what should have been a bountiful monsoon, here were two states fighting, and that was a few weeks earlier. But when I came back, traffic was held up on the highway that took me from Bangalore to Mysore, because now we had stopped releasing water to the lower riparian state. Now the fight was between a district that wanted water to drink and another district that wanted water to irrigate. So I think from those two stories, what I would really like to get at is that if we are really talking about conservation imperatives, I'm not talking of wildlife here. I'm talking, if you were to conserve clean air and water, which I suppose should be more relevant to most of us than some random animal in some random corner making a quiet exit. If that were the thing that we are trying to conserve and asking about conservation imperatives, what was happening everywhere with people queuing up to buy gas masks instead of mobilizing themselves to make a statement on something that would not, this would not be acceptable. And right now, human aspirations are driven by individual, they're very individual pursuits today. So I think the oxymoron, that they have become, I agree that they need not be oxymorons, but the larger social, economic, and political order under which we have decided to pursue our aspirations as humanity have been set up in such a way that there is no collectivism left anywhere. And conservation is a collective action problem. And the more we are going to be coming at it, at conservation problems like pure air, with individual solutions like buying a gas mask, this is going to be an oxymoron. And it's oxymoron by design. Whereas there is a greater degree of being able to align the two by design. And those 4 pillars are not accidents. And the way we've gone is not accident either. I think it's making a very strong, powerful statement on the direction we as a nation want to take.
Absolutely. See, now he was referring to water and he was referring to Arup's. Arup Saike is actually Professor of History, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, and he's written a book on the history of the Brahmaputra. Now, I can't think of somebody better than him to. Arup, would you like to?
Extraordinary commitment to the nature that was spilled out in the entire pages of this novel, right? It tells me that yes, they were burning the forest, but they were essentially respecting the forest in an enormous manner. In fact, now we know that shifting cultivators are much more higher in number compared to the sedentary cultivators. But what I see, the political driving force of the 15th century, like the Mughals, like the Marathas, or like anyway, the enormous amount of investment they have done in terms of agricultural expansions, creating wealth for the wars, for trade and commerce, then coming up to colonialism, so many things definitely happen. But I think what we need to know the post-1950 departures, the post-Gandhian departures, that we suddenly decided not to remember Gandhi anymore and to go for a massive amount of changes in the landscape, the way that thing took place. For example, the way we organized our agriculture post-1950, I was just teaching in my class early in the morning today, that the amount of agricultural land that was created in post-1950 to 1970, from few million hectares to almost several billion hectares in a 20 years of period, because we failed to enhance the per hectare yield and the people became more poor. They had no other options but to go more and more inside the forest. I think this is the issue. We really need to understand at least the forest-human dichotomy. In fact, as a historian, I always keep talking about that how forest and agriculture, they're precisely the frontier of the same thing. They keep on, there is always tug of war between this, the agriculture and the forest. Unless and until we understand these complexities of the agriculture and the forest story, the human and the non-human story, their interdependence on each other, I think these are our understanding of this oxymoron will not be quite complete. I think we also need to really understand the religious foundation of the very idea of nature, right? I think different religion has different ways of understanding religion. I think this is a very important point we really need to pursue. I just interacted with a very interesting historian. He is from Assam, but he has done enormous work on China. Prosenjit Dwara. Prosenjit Dwara is now one of the foremost authorities on Chinese history. His recent book is very interesting, called Crisis of Global Modernity. And he has talked about a very interesting point that how Buddhism had actually worked in a very fantastic manner in terms of coping up the relation between the nature and the human things, the human beings. I think these are issues that we really need to understand. I think the last point that I would like to emphasize, this very techno-bureaucratic understanding of the nation, right? Increasingly in the 20th century, nature is not a cultural space anymore. Nature is essentially a bureaucratic, a legal, a kind of technological understanding. I think that's forced the retreat of the humans, forced the retreat of the nature also. I think unless and until we really go back into these material foundations of the nature, I don't think we'll be able to comprehend these issues in a very comprehensive manner.
Good. We're talking about resources being depleted. We're talking about whether human beings and nature per se can possibly survive. I think the general conclusion is if we carry on doing what we're doing, we won't be able to. And from my understanding of what's going on, whether it's in Syria or whether it's in the various parts of India that we see, resource deprivation is going to lead to social conflict in ways that we don't have laws enough to solve them. Neither does religion have systems enough or controls enough on us. So I would like to know from you that are we already treading on thin ice in terms of the internal security of India because of our bad habit of not being able to live? Would you?
And I'll take this opportunity to also touch upon a few things. Ranjit, as usual, gets you involved in everything. So I've got stuck with him on the Club of Rome, and that's where I suddenly heard about all these, the ecological balance getting distorted totally. And so just a figure which I heard from Dr. Ashok Khosla the other day was that he said that if you went into the 1950s with the population and the, I would say the ecological footprint of the people on this earth, we were consuming about 0.3% of the Earth's resources. That was in 1950s. Today, when you come into 2015 or 2016, you're looking at wanting today for the present population and the ecological footprint of every individual across the earth, you require 1.7 Earths to survive at the present rate, which exactly brings you down to what you said. And when it brings it down to India, India was about 0.2, 0.3, which was a little lower than the rest of the world. But with the population explosion that we've done, we require 1.5 Indias now to be able to actually sustain ourselves if we continue in the same manner. That brings you exactly to what you said.
So are you going to be able to make sure that I don't start killing that person because I want the vegetables that she has bought from the market?
100%.
Is India going to be broken from the inside?
I would say that the areas of conflict which remain till date, which is only related to security and economic depravity, poor governance, issues which are afflicting a large portion of the Northeast, will actually fade into oblivion, and the other predominant things would be your water and food, as you said. Undoubtedly, it's going to happen. And the answer for us is, how do we do it? And I have a few thoughts, because the last appointment I did here was I was the co-commander here, and I looked after Arunachal, the rest of Arunachal, the 6 sisters. And we're looking at our economic development, the infrastructure development. Unfortunately, the policies of a country have been so warped that we are actually eating more into the ecological balance than is required to be done. To give you an example, If today I have to make a road which has to go all the way to Menchuka and Tooting, or if it has to go to Kibitu in Ralp, or if I'm looking at the eastern side of Tawang, where I'm looking at a road going, the sanction of money to us given is, say it's for 30 kilometers of road construction. Whereas the planning then for that particular cycle, the planning is only done for 30 kilometers. We're forgetting to understand that the Eastern Himalayas, at least as far as India is concerned, unlike a portion of Bhutan, a portion of Nepal and all of China, is sedimentary rock structure. And that is the reason when we do our surveys for 30 kilometers, a road which would have gone 100 kilometers to reach from one point to the other point, we do 150 or 160 kilometers, we do short hauls, so we are eating into the ecological footprint that exists along those hills for a road which would have actually only taken about a much lesser percentage. So I think the policy initiatives required to ensure and protect the environment here is extremely high. But I mean, I'll leave it at that, and I hope I did, because I missed out a little bit of a conversation.
Only person from the government? No, we're all government. But the fact is that she's supposed to be looking after forests. At one level, you have tribal activists who are saying, give us the forests, we know how to look after them. At another level, you have industry that's saying, look, you guys are inefficient, give it to us, we'll look after them. And nobody is really either enabling her to do this, and quite frankly, I don't know how you're going to do your job, but do tell us, how do you think you'll manage it? That work all right?
I'm Alka Bhargav. I'm basically looking at my substantive post-research education work in time. But we've got I'm just giving a short background of why I'm here in this session also, is that we have an extrapolated project, and I'm looking at the component dealing with livelihoods, forest, non-forest based livelihoods, and red flags, that carbon stuff and all that. But like being a professional forester, all these years, somehow, apart from my routine forest job, I have become more passionate about community development. Because when I was in Delhi on deputation, I was with Ministry of Agility, got a better perspective of how we can go about non-forest based community development too. So that is why, I mean, this, I really don't want, I agree with you, your opening remarks. This oxymoron really doesn't exist. The only thing is that you have to have a balance and sustainability. So those are the two things we are constantly having to fight. Because like what you said, I mean, we get it from both ways. If you don't give clearances for development, we're anti-development. If, I mean, we're conservationists. If we clear some kind of an encroachment, it becomes a human rights issue. So I mean, it's a very tough kind of a tightrope walk which we have. But we try, I mean, we understand the development issues too. And that development, human aspirations can actually be done in two levels. One could be the macro level, I mean the bigger dams and those kind of things. And the other micro level, which to my opinion is very, very important, and more important rather, is the livelihoods, the aspirations of the people living around the forest. Because I mean, all these years, I don't have to tell you this, I mean, you people know more about this than any of us in government or whatever, is that they've had a synergy. I mean, we had this structured joint forest management things coming in post 1990. But we, in Assam, I can have so many instances of traditional participation of the people in natural resource management. So it all comes down to sustainability. Earlier, the population pressure was not that much, both human cattle, but today it's grown. So what I'm pretty excited about is this project component is that we've got a very good structured kind of a capacity development, skill development program going on. And we've covered about, it's not a very big number right now, but 2,500 plus who've been trained in various things. And I've just got a few things which I think is something which is being done for the, I mean, I talked to my other counterparts in the other parts of the country. We've never had exhibitions and sales and outlets strictly for joint forest management committee produced products. We've got this logo, and in fact, we're also going for the International Trade Fair in Delhi. We've had 2-3 exhibitions here, and I mean, it's picking up. So that is one small way where we can fulfill the human aspiration kind of thing. And we are pretty sure that once you fulfill this, conservation is automatic. I mean, you don't have to say anything to the people who have been living there for ages in symbiotic relationship with the forest that you conserve. But because of the pressure, because of the growing dependency, this imbalance has occurred. So if we can give them some alternate options, even forest-based, medicinal plants. I mean, we had a big thing yesterday about Patanjali coming in, and There are a number of other, you name it, Nemami, Dabur, Himalaya, everything. They're all taking it from the forests. And most often very unsustainably also. So if we can tie up with these big players, give the communities the buyback options and things, so that they can cultivate, the forests are safe, sustainable, harvesting from the forest, ex situ cultivation gives income to the people, takes care of the human aspiration. So it's a balancing act. Development, conservation, everything goes together. And then this, just 2 minutes also, I'll just introduce you to that RED Plus concept, which I'm sure everyone knows. We're getting 2 pilots in Assam. One would be in Nagaon, one would be in Majuli. Majuli, we're pretty excited also because it's a new district. There's going to be a lot of infrastructure development. It's a biodiversity.